Let's start the process by just taking a look around the interface of Mudbox and just getting a feel for where everything is located. So open up Mudbox, and when we first start, we're going to get this welcome screen. Now this is going to give us some options for what we'd like to do. Over here on the left, you can see there's some small little movies that will just get you up to speed on navigating if you have any questions on that, starting with the painting and sculpting and so forth. We've also got some links for going to the community, the Mudbox community, which we'll look at in a second. Over here in the middle, we have the starting points. Here in Mudbox, we're provided with a number of different starting meshes that we can use. You can see at the bottom, we also have a link to go get more meshes from the community as well. So you can see we have, a T-Rex, a reptile, a basic head, a human body. So a lot of things that we can use to practice and use as our starting points for our projects here in Mudbox. Over to the right-hand side, if we have any recent files that we've been working with, those are going to be listed here, and we can open those up. And so if we click on any of these meshes, we would start with a mesh, and then we could also click on any of these files. Now, if you don't want to see this when you start up a new scene, you can go ahead and turn off those options here with these little checkboxes. Okay, we have the option to exit, and let's just close that up, and here we're in our new scene. So let's take a look around the interface. Got a pretty familiar menu bar up at the top. File. If we go in here, you can see these are our options for working with our scenes, saving, opening, also importing and exporting. And we also have options now for sending to different Autodesk applications. So we've got Send to Maya, 3ds Max, and Softimage, and all of those options associated with that. And we'll look at those a little bit later. Over here under Edit, we have options for selecting, undo, redo, locking, and freezing geometry. So that's going to be located under Edit. Create is going to give us the ability to put different objects into our scene. So we've got the Create Mesh, and these are all of the meshes that were actually listed in our starting points at that initial welcome screen. And so if you want to create something, you can go ahead and just click on that, and that'll bring that into the 3D view here. Okay, let's go ahead and continue talking about this, and then we'll talk about the tabs down here. So under Create, you can see we've got meshes. We've also got curves. You can create cameras, lights, materials, selection sets, and also stencils. And we'll talk about these as this course goes along. Under Mesh, this is where we're going to be working with the subdivision levels. So we can add new levels. We can step up and down. We can delete levels, rebuild levels on high-res meshes. We can recreate the level UVs, set the mirroring axis, the topological axis here. We can also transfer high-res details to other meshes. This is where you'll find the PTEX setup. When we start to do our texturing with PTEX, you'll find that here. And then also create UVs, and we've got options for flattening to UV space, which we'll look at. Under curves, we have the option for creating new curves, end, close, stroke on curve, and so forth. Under display, options for hiding and showing, different ways of displaying our geometry, whether we want there to be flat lighting or not. You can see that we've got lighting turned on. We can show both sides. Just options for how our scene is displaying our geometry. Okay. And next to that, we've got maps. And this is where we're going to actually extract our high-resolution texture maps, normal maps, displacement maps, ambient occlusion maps. That's going to be located here. And then we can also use those maps to do some sculpting, and that's going to be located under the maps. Render will allow us to get images out. So if we want to save a screen image, we want to record a movie of us working, or we want to just create a turntable of our model, we can do that all here. Windows will allow us to see the different pieces of our interface. We can look at the different hotkeys. We can look at our viewport filters, poses. We can go into preferences and set any of the preferences that we want to set here. That's going to be under Windows. And then Help. Obviously, you've got a lot of options for help tutorials. You can go to the Mudbox community, connect with other Mudbox users, find out the kind of issues that they're having, and figure out a solution that way. So a lot of options here under Help as well. Now, moving down into the center, you can see we have the 3D view. Now, to navigate our 3D view, I can just hold down Alt, left mouse button to rotate around. Okay. You can track across with the middle mouse button, still holding down Alt, and then right mouse button, move in and out. Okay, so these hotkeys should be familiar for navigating around. Okay. If I hit F, it will focus frame in on the cursor there. Hit A, it'll kind of frame that all into our scene. We can kind of move around here. Now inside of our 3D view, if I right click out here in the 3D view, I get a marking menu, and this will give us a lot of the options that we found under display. So we can turn the grid off. Okay, we can go to wireframe. We can also hit W is the hotkey for turning on a wireframe view. All right, and this is something that you can really do very quickly. You don't have to wait for the actual marking menu to come up. You can just right click and stroke or gesture up, and it'll figure out what you want. Now the marking menu changes as we're hovering over now our model. We now get options for editing materials, isolating our model, deselecting the model, showing it, other options for creating new materials, and so forth. So the marking menu will change depending on if you are hovering over the 3D view or an actual piece of geometry. Okay, so that's our 3D view. It's going to be where we're going to be doing most of our work here. Now we can change, right now we're in a perspective, we can kind of rotate around. We can go into our marking menu, go to switch view, and we can go to different views. So you're not stuck with the perspective view. You can always change that up. Now next to our 3D view tab, we have UV view. This gives us just a view of our UVs. We're not going to be doing any editing here in our UV view, but it will give us an idea of what those UVs look like. You can see that this is a single UV tile. In Mudbox we can actually use multiple UV tiles, and those will all be displayed in here if we have those on our model. This particular model just has one UV tile here, so you can see those UVs laid out. Next to our UV view, we have the image browser, and this image browser will allow us to navigate to different folders. So here we're in our folder with our project files. You can see we've got folders here. If you have images in your project files, you can see those in here. We can move those around if we want to be able to see the whole thing. We can pop that in here. We can also send that over to our 3D view as a stamp, as a stencil, or as an image plane. Okay, we can do some rotation on that, and it gives us just a little bit of information about the images that we're working with. Okay, so that is our image browser. Next to that is the Mudbox community, and this is a really great place to connect with other Mudbox users. You can come here within your Mudbox application. You can see a gallery of images that other Mudbox users have posted. You can post your own images. We've also got a library that we can access. We can come in and get different stamps and stencils. And it's actually very, very cool because you can just come in here and let's say we want to use this image here. You can see we've got the stamps library. We want to use this, we can just click on this, and that will actually go ahead and get that stamp for us, download it into our scene so that we can use that. And then we also have the ability to upload our own work. So make sure to check that out. That's under the Mudbox community. Okay, so over here on the right-hand side, next to our 3D view, UV view, image browser, and Mudbox community are the layers, object list, and viewport filters. Let's start in the object list. This is going to be something like an outliner or a hypergraph if you've used Maya, and it's going to just be a listing of all of the things in our Mudbox scene. So we've got cameras here, and you can see that those are differentiated by different icons. We've got our cameras, we've got a light, a default material, and then we've got our mesh. You can see next to some of these there's a little plus sign. We can open that up, and you can see associated with each camera there are there's a stencil and an image plane option. Under our T-Rex, we can open that up, and this will actually display our subdivision levels if we have those. Okay. Now next to each of these we have two little columns here. One is the visibility, pretty straightforward. You can see the little eye icon, and another is lock. So we can go ahead and lock any of these, and so that we know not accidentally manipulating those. Okay, we can turn the visibility off and on here. Over here we get a little bit more information about whatever that particular thing is. Up here in these little arrows, if you see these, you can click on these and you'll get options here. For instance, in this object list, it pertains to filtering what we're actually seeing, and so we can go ahead and do that. Now on the left of object list is the layers tab. This is where we're going to find our sculpt layers and also our paint layers, which is going to be all of our texture maps. So you can see I have two little tabs that I can switch between here within layers. Okay, and then we have options in here with a little arrow that we can click to create new layers and then duplicate those layers, flatten them, import layers, and so forth. Okay, and we'll talk more about what sculpt layers actually are a little bit later, but it really is just a method of really doing some sculpting on your model in a very flexible way and being able to dial in that sculpting and take it away and be able to manipulate it very quickly. Okay, we have the option here for creating a new layer, deleting a layer, and then this is for the masking on the layer, being able to see that. And then again, we have the visibility, the lock, and then what layer that this sculpt layer is actually, or what level this sculpt layer is actually on, will be located here. And then we would have the ability to create or to change the strength. And we'll again look at this a little bit later. Under paint layers, we have something similar. We'll have the name of the paint layer and the strength. This will have to have paint layers when we start to do our painting of our texture maps, and so those will be located here. Again, we have other options. You can see we have a few more associated with paint layers than we do with sculpt layers, and we'll look at those a little bit later, but that's going to be located here. Okay, now right underneath those three tabs, or actually let's look at viewport filters really quickly. The viewport filters are going to allow us to use what Mudbox calls its on-target presentation, and that just allows us to do our sculpting in an environment that more closely matches the final environment that our model is going to be in. So if we're going to have some depth of field, we'll be able to use this depth of field and sculpt in that environment. If we're going to have some, we want to have some ambient occlusion to be able to make it look a little bit more realistic and so forth. So this is going to help us out. And again, we'll look at that more closely a little bit later. Down here, we've got our properties. So any tool that we select, the properties are going to be located over here. So let's take a look at the tools. The tool trays are down here on the lower left-hand side. We've got the sculpting tools is the first tray we'll see. And so you can see we've got sculpt, smooth, grab, and as we go through all of these different sculpting tools, you can see those properties pop up over here. Next to that, the paint tools. Again, as we click those, properties show up over here. Now painting and sculpting, the brush behavior is going to be very similar, and we'll talk about that as we go along. We've also got the pose tools. We can create poses, create joints and poses for our models. We've also got the ability to select our objects, so we can select it there. If you want to deselect it, we can just right click on this and go deselect. We can also translate, rotate, and scale our models around in our Mudbox scene. So next to those trays, over here, you'll see we have some trays that are going to help us when we're sculpting and painting. So the first tray is a stamp tray, and this is going to be a listing of all of these images that we can use as stamps. So these actually will go in here. You can see it under the sculpt properties. I have an option for using a stamp, and so we're actually using an image along the stroke that we create. Okay, and those are all located here. Again, in our image browser, we can bring in our own images and create and use those as stamps. Stencils are going to be a little bit different. They're going to be something where we place them over the model and then paint through them rather than using them as the actual stroke. Next to that is fall off. The fall off is sort of the shape of the brush, how that falls off from the inside of the brush stroke, and you can actually change that in your properties as well. Under fall off, you can see that we can actually manually change the fall off. These are basically fall off presets that we can real quickly select to change the fall off of our brush. And as we go through painting and sculpting, we'll see that. The material presets are very quick little thumbnails. You can see that we can just change the material preset of our model to whatever it is that we want to be able to start using. Okay, this one is the default if you want to go back to that. Next to that, lighting presets, the same thing. We can change our lighting really quickly using these presets. And then camera bookmarks allow us to come in if we got a camera angle that we like, add a camera bookmark. We can just call this test, and then we move around, come back, and that bookmark is still there. Okay, now down below we get some information about our scene. You can see we can get the information about the subdivision levels that we're working with and so forth down here. All right, so that is kind of a quick look at the interface. Now, looking at these tools, let's go ahead and look at something that's new here in 2012, and that is the hotbox along with the marking menu. So if we hit the space bar, you can see that we have these little icons come up, and these correspond, these four on the outer portion correspond to the trays down here. So we've got the sculpting tools here. If we click on those, you can see that we can access those very quickly. We've got the painting tools, the pose tools, and then the select and move tools here. Okay, now this is going to correspond with our display, and this is going to correspond with our object. So this would be the same as if we were to right click out in the 3D view, and this is what we would get if we would right click over the model. So this is just one handy location where we can access all of that. And then here we can access the brush size and strength, then if we come in here, we've got some options for stamps and stencils and so forth. So that's spacebar again, and that is the hotbox. And then again, right-click is a marking menu. So just a little bit easier to access some of the tools that we'll be commonly using very, very quickly. All right, so once we have a model in here, let's go ahead and use this T-Rex mesh. Before we do anything, we need to actually start to shape this. So let me go ahead and deselect this. Let's turn on wireframe so we can see this. So right now we have very low resolution, and so what we want to do in Mudbox is start to subdivide this geometry so that we can start sculpting in all of that high-res detail. Now to subdivide, we would go to Mesh, Add New Subdivision Level, which is Shift-D. Okay, we can go ahead and hit that. You can also see that we've got a new level here, and in our object list you can see that level that is listed there. We hit D again to subdivide again. Do it again. Now we've got up to level 3. Let's turn off our wireframe. And now we can come in with page up and page down. So I'll page down to go down to the lowest level, page up to go to highest level. So it's going to be something where we can go back and forth when we're working in Mudbox as we're sculpting. We can go back and forth up the subdivision levels as we start working. And we'll look at that procedure as we go through this process. All right, so now that we've got our model subdivided, we've got a good idea of where everything is located here in Mudbox. Let's take a look at the basics of sculpting in Mudbox. So we'll go ahead and take a look at that in the next lesson.